let's go ahead and practice what we see here. Okay, so here strings, remember strings are just variables where you can manipulate text. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to paste it. Well, first of all, why is it black? Well, because it doesn't know that it's supposed to be a script. Okay. Another thing that I haven't been doing so much is indenting, but in my examples, but it is very important for you to indent. So please do that. Okay, and remember in previous examples in the textbook, when you copied and pasted, when they had a comment, it actually continued on the next line and it gave you issues. But this time it's not giving me issues, so that's really good. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and save and refresh, and let's see what it does. Okay, and it didn't do anything. Okay, what is it supposed to do? So we have a string here, and it's really wonderful using this program because it tells you where you're repeating variables. And we have another string here, and it says, hello world, how are you? Now, basically, I mentioned the concatenation a little bit earlier, and there is a definition down here. It's basically how you would connect strings and variables together to form a statement. So we have two strings here. We have hello world, and then we have how are you? So instead of just displaying, one thing at a time, like we did with document write, like here's document write, we just wrote out some output from JavaScript, but you can actually not only write text like this, but then you can put, like a variable at the end there or something else. And that's what they're showing here, is that you can put a variable, then like a space, and then another variable together. So it could be displayed. So, and this is how you would do it. Now you don't need to use this concat here, but we're still showing you. I don't like that it has a lot of stuff here. So I'm actually going to comment this out and do a document write with the string. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this document write. And then, okay, let's go ahead and just see that this document write displays. So I'm going to go ahead and save and then refresh. Okay, so it does display. That's wonderful. Okay, so let's go ahead and display. Instead, I want to display this string here. So we're just going to put str and then 1. And now let's save and then refresh. And now it says hello world. Okay, great. And so we have string 1, it says hello world. String 2 says how are you? So what I'm going to do now is see how it says hello world, and I'm displaying str1. Let's go ahead and display str2, save and refresh. So now it says how are you? Okay, now when it mentions concatenation, you can actually use the plus here to put things together. So you can actually say, hello world, how are you, in one document, not just one thing at a time. So I'm going to go ahead and put str1 plus str2. Now we're not really adding them, we're just using the plus sign to say, well, I want to display this and that. So if we do save and then refresh, now it says, hello world, how are you? It put it together, it concatenated it. So note that you don't have to use this concat. In this document right here, we have that we're displaying str1 and str2. Well, if you notice, it's kind of mushed together. We actually want to separate it a bit. So to separate it, you can actually, and basically just how they have it in this example here, you can do quotes and you're going to put a space inside those quotes to say, well, I want to display a space in between them. So now we do plus and then quote and then close quote. You got to remember that space too, and then do a plus in between. So basically you're doing a string, you're doing string, a plus, and then whatever you want in between the strings and quotes, and then a plus, and then the second string. So basically, anytime you have like a variable or something in quotes, you have to have that plus in between it. And let me just show you real quick. I'm going to save and refresh, and notice how you have a space there. And let me go ahead and make it really obvious. I'm going to go ahead and put a bunch of I's in the quotes, and then save and refresh. And there you have all those I's. So you could actually say, you know, something in between these variables here. And a good example of why you would do this is actually kind of opposite of what they have here. So you could actually, you know, if you had a web page, you could actually give the user an input box where they can enter their name. And then that name will be saved in a variable. So, well, actually, let me put somebody else's name. You could, so when they enter the name in that space, it will be entered in a variable. So then the variable is displayed. And remember, variables are there because it might change. So not everybody that visits your website is going to be named Jenny. They could enter Mike, they could enter Steve, they could enter, you know, many different names. But so you can personalize it, you're going to say that that space, whatever they enter, is going to be put in this variable, and then it's going to, you're going to display it, and then you're going to say something like hello, and then str says, how are you? So if we do save and then refresh, and now it says, you know, Jenny. And also know that, notice again that it's squished like that, but if you want a space before hello and after hello, keep in mind that you could just put a space before and after it in the quotes. So if we save and then refresh, well, now we have your spaces around it. So that's how you would concatenate strings and, you know, just text, variables, text, strings, and basically anything. So you could even, you know, put numbers. So that is strings and how you can concatenate them together. So that was it for the string section there. I hope that made sense. You will actually need to do something like that in the assignment. But as you can see down here, it does basically the same thing. You're actually displaying my cars, or whatever is in the array, plus a break so that it goes to the next line. So you're basically concatenating these two together to display what's in the array. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this array. And again, I like to copy and paste. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this code. And then I'm just going to replace what I have. And, you know, the reason why I do that is because, you know, the less code, the better, particularly when you're learning something, because you never know if there is, if you'll have errors. You want to make sure that you don't have a lot of stuff. And, you know, that is actually a way to get rid of errors, because like, let's say you're having an issue here, it's not doing what you want. You might want to get rid of some of your code and then, you know, see if, you know, at least that works, that kind of thing. So getting rid of code just to see if it works is kind of a good option. And also, if you are deleting code, be sure that you know, save a different version of it. At the very beginning of the book, it mentioned this doing versioning. So I have JS array class, and basically, remember earlier I had the concatenation stuff here, but then I deleted it. Well, you know what? Maybe I want to keep it. So I have this JS array class, but I put a 1 at the end so that I know it's basically the same thing, but then I made some change, so I have a 1. The reason for that is because let's say you have all this code, you don't really want to start deleting stuff, and then you don't know how to get back to the code that you had that actually worked, because then you just got rid of everything you've done and you have to start over. So it's a really good idea that, you know, when you're having issues or, you know, you're adding new things, maybe you want to, you know, have many different versions of the program that you're working on. It might not be so much now that the programs are not that long, but you know, I recommend it just in case, because I wouldn't want to lose my code. Anyway, so back to what we were doing. So remember that I changed the file name. I put a 1 at the end. So this actually is not the most recent version. So I'm going to go ahead and double click this JS array 1. And I am just one of those paranoid type people. I want to confirm that this is the one I'm working on. So yes, it does have the number 1. All right. So the question is, well, I just added all this array stuff, but nothing happened. Okay. Well, one thing is that, well, first of all, how do we even know that JavaScript is even working at this time? So one thing you can do is just get rid of things and only keep the stuff that you know should be working. Because, you know, this whole array and this loop thing, it's kind of new. So how do we know that stuff should be working? But what we do know is that there's a document write. You know that, well, we know that, well, we've done document write before, so we know that that works. So I'm just going to put document write and then hi, and then it has a break. So now I'm going to save and then refresh, and it still doesn't do anything. Okay, well, let's just get rid of the break, because really, you know what, I haven't really done that so much, you know, doing a document write and then a tag inside of it. So now I'm going to save and then refresh again. Well, there's still nothing there, but we know that document write should work. And it's in the script tag, so what's wrong with it? Well, remember what I said in the textbook here, where it says, if you copy and paste this code, you'll probably have to replace the quotes. So let me go ahead and do that. And all I'm doing is deleting the quote and then putting it back. I'm actually typing it in. Now, if you look really closely, look at how it is different. The second quote is actually more slant than the other quote. So it is considered a different character, although it looks like a quote. So just keep in mind that that might happen. And remember that it's going to, so there it is right there. It's just the letter hi. So that was the only problem with it, is that it needed those quotes, the right quotes. So again, keep that in mind. And also when you're doing other programming languages, that might happen, especially when you copy and paste. So really keep that in the back of your mind. So what I'm going to do is just undo everything, because I want all my code back. And now I know that I need to replace these quotes. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And frankly, since I knew that that was a problem, and you can still tell that they are slanted type quotes here. So we want to go ahead and delete all of them. And, you know, you can probably do a find and replace, but that still might even give you drama. So I'm just doing it all manually. And it looks to be fine. So I'm going to save and then refresh. And now it's gone. Well, why is it gone? Well, remember in the books, and I'm so sorry I have to like come back and kind of tell you about the errors, but remember what I said here about my cars. I have this scratched out here because basically you're doing a loop, and remember what this line is for. This first part here is telling the loop what to start with, and it's 0, and we have to put 0 because of the array. It starts with 0. So x equals 0, and then while x is less than, well, in the book it says stooges.length, but there's nothing called stooges. It needs to be ending where x is less than my car's dot length. That's where it's going to stop. And this is the increment. It's just going to add 1 every time it goes through the loop. So let me go ahead and change that. It needs to say my cars. And remember also that it's case sensitive. So if you have lowercase, all lowercase, it needs to be all lowercase. I just put spaces there right now just because it looks better, but it's not necessary. Anyway, so now I have my cars here, and it doesn't have stooges anymore. So let me go ahead and save and then refresh. Now does it display? No, it doesn't. Okay, so what else is wrong with it? Okay, and one thing, and while I think about what could be wrong with it, I am going to show you something else, and it might be the issue too. One thing you can do also, now remember that there is a dot length here. So what did the dot length do? The dot length tells you that, or basically determines how many items are in the array. So in this situation here, there's 0, there's 1, and then there's 2. So those are 3 items there. So this myCars.length actually should determine that there's 3. So we could actually just put 3 here because we know that there's 3. But, well, what's the reason for having the dot length in the first place? Well, the dot length is because remember that, you know, there are so many things you can do with the program. You can ask the user, well, how many items do you want in this array? The user could type in 5, they could type in 10 or 100. You know, the user can determine how big this array is. So if the user can determine it, well, how do you know when to stop the loop? So, so that's why you would do a dot length. But at this point, we know that it can end at 3. So we can go ahead and save and then refresh, and it'll do it 3 times. But while doing that, I figured out what the problem was. Have you figured out what the problem is? Well, the problem is that I still have, notice how there's an open curly brace here and then there's a close. Well, I commented the close. So now the code is, basically the code is like, I don't know where to stop, so I'm just not going to do anything. So it's just because I had that commented out. So I'm going to go ahead and put the myCars.length back just so I can show you with it actually working. So I took off the quote or the comment, save it and refresh. Yay, now we have stuff on our page. So now the code is fixed. Basically, so let me kind of review the problems with the code in the book. Number 1, it says stooges instead of my car, so be sure you put that back or put that there. And number 2 was the quotes. So be sure to change those quotes if you copy and paste. If you do type it, in a way, I do recommend typing it so that you get familiar with the code. But just remember that it's very, very easy to make an error because user error. Humans are not perfect. So you might actually mistype something, misspell something, and it might be hard to find because an E is kind of, you know, very similar to an A. So just keep that in mind if you do decide to type it all up. All right, so that is an array. This is an array here, and we determine what was in the array, and then we display the array. So actually, if I were to put comments, I can actually say display array, and instead of this some examples, I could put something like, actually, see right here where it says variables. Typically in programs, you actually have a variables area, but to tell you the truth, the array is typically near it. So, and it is variables. So you can actually just say variables. Okay, and I made a change. So remember, it's always safe when you make a change, you save and refresh. So yes, it's still working. So, so do we understand basically what we're doing here? So we have an array. It's called my cars. And then in these 3 lines here, we're filling out the spots for my cars, or for the different cars. So let's say I wanted to change this to Corvette. The first thing would say Corvette instead. Save and refresh. Let's say instead of a BMW, I want a, should I put a Ford Focus? No, I don't want to put that. Okay, I'm gonna do it anyways. Okay, Ford. Okay, so save and refresh, and now we have Ford there, but yeah, I want to get rid of that. Let's stick with BMW. Okay, so anyway, basically when you want to change the items in the array, you just put it here. Now, let's say we didn't have this loop here. I'm going to go ahead and comment out the for, and all I'm going to do is put document write. And then I am actually just going to put my cars, and because we still have the array up here, I'm going to put my cars and then 0. And when you put 0 there, you're basically going to display my cars at 0, which is just Corvette. So on the document, I'm going to only put the very first item in my array. So if I do save and then refresh, I'm only displaying the first item. So if I were to change this 0 to a 1, save and then refresh, now it says Volvo. What if I put 3? Because we have 3 items in our array, don't we? If I put a 3 in there and then save, well, it says undefined. Why would it say undefined? We have 3 items. Well, the index in the array, we don't have a 4th item in the array, and the array, and the 4th item would be an index of 3. That's why it's undefined. You don't have anything in there. So if I want to display BMW or the 3rd item, I would have to use the number 2. Very, very important that you remember 0 is a number. Even when you take networking classes, 0 is a number. Okay, so let's go ahead and go back to using X. Now, why do we use X in the first place? Why was there an X there? Well, there's an X there because there's a loop. If we bring this loop back, remember remember the different sections of a loop? This is where it starts. Oh, sorry. This is where it starts at 0. This is where it ends. So as long as its X is less than the length of my cars, then we're going to do whatever's in this loop. This tells you when it's going to stop. And then X++ is just to increment X. So that's why it goes from 0, 1, and then 2 when it's displayed. So if I do a save and then refresh, that's why it shows the first item, the second item, and the third item, because This loop right here increments x. So the first time it goes through, it has 0 here. Second time it goes through, it says 1 here. Third time it goes through, it says 2 here, because it's incrementing, it's adding 1 to it. And actually, let's go ahead and let me show you that. Yeah, let me show you that. So I am actually going to put a plus, and then I'm actually going to display x. Oops, that's a uppercase. Okay, I'm going to display x. So not only are we going to display what's in here, but then we're going to have x, or whatever is in the x variable, and then we're going to have a break. And actually, we need a space in between these two. So I'm actually going to do another, in quotes, I'm going to put a space and then plus again. Save and then refresh. And now you see what x represents. So the first time it goes in the loop, x is 0. The second time x is 1. The third time x is 2. So we're just displaying what x is here. Also note that there is a BR here. Now, why is that BR here? What would happen if we were to get rid of this BR? Save it and then refresh. Oops. Well, the BR was in the loop to not only display what was in the array, and then of course I added X. Well, the BR was in the loop, so it actually repeated BR after it displayed each item in the array. So that was actually quite helpful. And also note too that we previously did, maybe I didn't pay much attention to it, but when you're doing this document write, not only can you write text like we did before, and let me go ahead and go back here. When we did output document write and we displayed text, well, we also had HTML code in here. This is B, and that represents bold. Now, if you think about that, if we go a little bit further there, remember that B is not really recommended because we need to use cascading style sheets, but this is just an example of the fact that you can put tags inside of this document write, and it would be in quotes. Okay, so that's what we're doing here. We have text in quotes, and then of course we can put something else. I could put space. Now, here is a break. So instead of just putting the array, a space, and then the X, now it's going to say, now here's a break, and then it'll put the break. So I save and then refresh. Now here's a break, and then it goes to the next line. See, so that's concatenating. We are adding a whole bunch of stuff to be written on our page. And that is actually what you're going to have to do in the assignment. So let's see, this is week 15. Oops. So in the lab, now we've created an array, and I'll mention what I was just talking about in a little bit, the concatenation part. But the assignment, you need to create an array. We've created an array there. This right here is for the loop. I'm actually going to put that. Okay, and then we have the array again. Then we need a name for the array. So know that we used my cars because it is part of the code in the book, but I need you to make it a different variable for your array. So instead of using my cars, if it is pets, I need you to name it pets instead. And the point of doing that is so that you can tell Well, if I change pets here, this is the name of the array, then I need to change it everywhere else I'm referring to the array. So that is the point of doing that. I need you to make sure that you understand that this is the variable for the array. So anytime you refer back to it, it needs to say pets or whatever you call it. So in the assignment, you're actually going to create a list of something. And you can do cars, but you can't call it my cars. I named it pets, so then my pets are going to be something like cats, and then dogs, and then birds, and so on. And that is actually what is in the example down here. Now, one thing I'm missing down here is that not only do in the array do you need to call it something that's appropriate, because remember you can list a bunch of trees, a bunch of anime that you like, or foods that you eat, your favorite foods. You can make a list of whatever you want, but it needs to have a name that's appropriate. So it could be foods. You can call it foods. You can call it trees. But it also has to have 5 items, like now down here, I only have 4 items. So that's kind of a boo-boo that I did. I should have 5 items listed here. So, I could have added like lizard or something. So that's another pet. So it must have 5 items. Now, how do we put a different amount of items here? Well, you have 3 here. And let's say I wanted 6 items. Well, now I have 6. Now I have 9. The only thing is that you would have to change this index number. So 0, 1, 2, and then 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. So that is how you change the amount of items that you have in the array. But just remember, just because this last one is 6 does not mean that I have 6 of them in there, because remember that 0 counts. So that's actually 7. So just be aware of that. Okay, also in the assignment, you need to create a loop. Here's the loop here. And actually in this comment, I probably should have said loop to display array. Okay, so here's a loop. And it displays, it has the document right, display items array. And I'm changing it because it needs to make sense. Remember, you do comments because other people are reading it, and you need to make sure that they understand what you're doing there. So, and it also helps you. Anyway, so you're creating a loop. You need to use the X variable to count the iterations. Here is the X variable, where it starts at 0, it ends at mycars.length, and then this increases it. So this actually causes it to increase by 1. Starts from 0, you add 1, there's 1. Add another one, that's 2. Add another one, that's 3. That's how it counts. This is where it starts, this is where it stops. So the example in the book does use the X variable, so that's okay. You need to use the length property to determine the amount of times to repeat. And that would be this here. We have dot length. Then inside the loop, we need a statement that shows the content of the array, which would be this document right. And then each item should be separated by paragraph tags. So you're going to use concatenation to add paragraph tags. Remember, I added this break here. You're going to have to add paragraph tags around the content in your array. And that I'm not going to show you because I did show you this. So think about how can you add the paragraph tags while you're showing the items in your array. And always remember, well, this is the example here. Always remember, after completing the requirements, feel free to be creative. So this is a very basic example of what the page has to look like. But we have learned so much in class, and this is the last lab. So as long as you meet the requirements, be sure you do that first. Then you can be creative. You can add other things to it if you like. And always remember to refer back to this rubric to make sure that you have all of the requirements. And if you wanted to add something, another good recommendation would be to, that this works, save it and leave it as it is. Then create another file to add more stuff to it, to kind of have fun with it. And and let's just say, at some point you added so much stuff that it just doesn't even work anymore, that you have the original that you can just submit. So, and you don't have to do any extra stuff. It's up to you. I just want you to have fun with this.